Today we are going deep into 100 real estate terms you must know for your exam. But we are not just memorizing definitions. I'm going to explain them clearly, give you memory tricks, and show you how they actually appear on the test. Let's start with contract foundation. An offer. An offer is a written proposal by a buyer to purchase a property under specific terms and conditions. It must include a price, financing terms, closing date, and any contingencies. Remember this, an offer becomes a contract only when it is accepted exactly as it is written. Example, a buyer offers $500,000 with a 30-day closing and a financing contingency. Acceptance. Acceptance is the seller agreeing to the offer exactly as written without changes. The moment the seller signs without modifying anything, you now have a mutual agreement. If anything changes, price, date, terms, it is no longer acceptance. It becomes a counteroffer. Counteroffer. A counteroffer rejects the original offer and creates a new one. This is key for the exam. Original offer is dead. It no longer exists once counted. Example, a buyer offers $500,000, the seller changes the price to $515,000. That's a counteroffer. Consideration. Consideration is something of value exchanged between parties. In real estate, it is usually money from a buyer and the promise to transfer ownership from the seller. Without consideration, there is no enforceable contract. A bilateral contract. A bilateral contract is a promise for a promise. Both parties are legally bound. Most real estate purchase contracts are bilateral. A buyer promises to pay, the seller promises to transfer the title. A unilateral contract. A unilateral contract is a promise in exchange for performance. Only one party is legally bound. Best example for your exam, an open listing. The seller promises to pay whoever finds the buyer, but no broker is obligated to perform. An executed contract. An executed contract means all parties have signed. Does not mean the transaction has closed. Void versus voidable. Void means never valid from the beginning. Voidable means valid, but one party has the option to cancel. Example, a minor signing a contract makes it voidable. A contingency. A contingency is a condition that must be satisfied for the contract to continue. Examples: financing contingency, inspection contingency, appraisal contingency, and so forth. If the contingency fails, the buyer can typically withdraw. Specific performance. Specific performance is a legal remedy where the court forces a party to perform the contract. Real estate is considered unique, so courts may force a seller to complete the sale. Section 2, ownership and tenancy. Tenancy and severalty. Ownership by one person or one legal entity. There is no co-owner. Severalty means separate. Tenancy in common. Two or more people own a property. Shares can be equal or unequal. There is no right of survivorship. If one owner dies, their share passes to the heirs. Joint tenancy. Joint tenancy includes the right of survivorship. That means when one owner dies, their share automatically passes to the other owners. Remember the acronym? TTIP. Time, title, interest, and possession. All four must be equal for joint tenancy to exist. If one is missing, it becomes tenancy in common. Tenancy by the entirety. A special form of ownership only for married couples or reciprocal beneficiaries. It includes the right of survivorship and often protects the property from one spouse's creditors. Be simple. The highest and most complete form of ownership. Unlimited duration, maximum rights. A life estate. Ownership limited to someone's lifetime. The person holding it is called the life tenant. After death, property passes to the remainder man. Leasehold. The right to use the property for a specific time under a lease. Don't own the land, only the right to occupy. Title and encumbrances. Title. Title refers to legal ownership rights. You don't hold a title physically, it represents your ownership interest. A deed. A deed transfers title from a grantor to a grantee. It must be written and delivered. Types include a general warranty deed, a special warranty deed, quitclaim deed, and so forth. Chain of title. The history of ownership of a property. Title companies examine this to ensure that there are no defects. An encumbrance. Anything that limits or affects ownership. Examples are liens, easements, restrictions. Encumbrances do not prevent transfer, but they affect the value. An easement. The right to use another's property for a specific purpose. Utility companies commonly hold easements. Ownership remains with the property owner. An encroachment. That's when a structure crosses property lines without permission. An example, a fence built 2 feet into the neighbor's land. A lien. A legal claim against a property for unpaid debt. The property can be sold to satisfy the lien. Section 4, Finance. A mortgage. That's a loan secured by real estate. If a borrower defaults, the lender can foreclose. Principal. The original loan amount borrowed. It does not include interest. Interest. That's the cost for borrowing money. It's usually expressed as an annual percentage rate, APR. Amortization. The gradual repayment of a loan over time through scheduled payments. Early payments are mostly interest. Later payments are mostly principal. LTV, loan to value. The loan amount divided by the property value. A higher LTV results in higher risk to the lender. Points. 1 point equals 1% of the loan amount, paid upfront to reduce the interest rate. A PMI, private mortgage insurance. It protects the lender and not the buyer. It is required when down payment is low. An acceleration clause. That allows the lender to demand full balance if the borrower defaults. A balloon payment. That's a large lump sum payment due at the end of the loan term. Market value. That's the most probable price property would sell under normal conditions. An appraisal. A professional opinion of value for lender purposes. CMA. The broker's estimate of value. It's not the same as an appraisal. The assessed value. That's the value used for tax calculations. Equity. That's the market value minus the loan balance. Capital gain. That's a profit from selling property. Proration. Dividing expenses fairly at closing. Example, property taxes are split between the buyer and the seller. Section 6, agency. Agent represents the principal in a transaction. The principal, that's the client, the buyer or the seller. Fiduciary duty, that's the highest standard of care. It includes loyalty, obedience, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable care. Dual agency. That's one agent represents both the buyer and the seller. It requires disclosure and consent. Disclosure. Revealing material facts that would affect the value. Escrow. A neutral third party that holds funds and documents until conditions are met. Title insurance protects against past title defects. RESPA, Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. It protects consumers from abusive closing practices. The Truth in Lending Act. It requires lenders to disclose true loan costs. And foreclosure. That's the legal process where the lender takes property after default. Alright, if you're serious about passing at a high level, these next 25 advanced concepts that separate the average student from the top scores. Let's continue. Hypothecation. Hypothecation means pledging the property as security for a loan without giving up possession. You keep the house and the lender gets a lien. A memory anchor, you hypothetically lose the property if you default. Alienation clause, also called a do-on-sale clause. This allows the lender to demand full repayment if the property is sold. You cannot transfer the property without paying off the loan. A subordination clause. This allows a new loan to take priority over the existing loan. Priority matters because the first lien gets paid first in a foreclosure process. Novation. Novation replaces one party in a contract with a new party, releasing the original party from liability. The key difference? Assignment transfer rights. Novation transfers the rights and obligation. An assignment. That's a transfer of contractual rights to another party, but the original party remains liable unless there is novation. The doctrine of embezzlement. If a tenant plants crops and the lease ends unexpectedly, the tenant has the right to harvest. This protects farmers, for example. The doctrine of prior appropriation. That's related to water rights systems that are used in some states. First in time, first in right. Whoever used the water first would have priority. Littoral versus riparian rights. Riparian means flowing like a river. Littoral is more for standing water like lake or the ocean. On the exam, they will test the difference. Accretion. That's a gradual increase of land due to the natural forces like sediment deposits. Ownership increases automatically. Avulsion. The sudden loss of land due to a natural disaster. Ownership boundaries do not change automatically. Memory trick. Accretion slow, avulsion is violent. Police power. That's the government's right to regulate for health, safety, and welfare. This is how zoning laws exist. Eminent domain. The government power to take private property for public use must provide for just compensation. Escheat. If someone dies without heirs, no will, the property goes to the state. Inverse condemnation. That's when the government action reduces the property value and the owner sues for compensation. The opposite of eminent domain. Constructive eviction. That's when a landlord fails to maintain the property and the tenant is forced to leave. The tenant can terminate the lease. Actual eviction. Physical removal of a tenant for the lease violation of non-payment. A percentage lease. The tenant pays base rent plus percentage of business revenue. It is common in retail shopping centers. A net lease. The tenant pays rent plus some or all of the operating expenses. A single net, a double net, or a triple net lease. Triple net means the tenant pays taxes, insurance, and maintenance. A gross lease. The landlord pays the operating expenses. The tenant pays fixed rent. A graduated lease. Rent increases at predetermined intervals. That's common in long-term leases. A blanket mortgage. One loan covering multiple properties, often used by developers. A package mortgage. That's a loan that covers both real and personal property. An example, an apartment building plus appliances. A defeasance clause. If the borrower repays a loan, the lender releases the lien. This defeats the mortgage. Usury. Charging interest above the legal maximum. That's illegal in most jurisdictions. Real estate investment trust, a REIT, a company that owns income-producing real estate. Investors buy shares instead of the physical property. If you understand these advanced concepts, you're not just memorizing vocabulary. These next 25 terms are elite-level concepts. If you understand them, you're operating at a completely different level. Ready? Situs. Situs refers to the economic location of a property. An example, two identical homes, different neighborhoods, different situs, different value. External obsolescence. That's a loss of value caused by outside factors. Example, a highway is built next to a home. Important, it is usually incurable. Functional obsolescence. That's the loss of value due to outdated design or layout. Example, a 5-bedroom home with only one bathroom. Sometimes curable, sometimes not. Economic obsolescence. That's the loss of value due to broader economic conditions. Example, a major employer leaves an area. Reconciliation. That's the final step in an appraisal process. The appraiser weighs all the approaches to value and determines all opinion. The cost approach, sales comparison, and the income approach. Capitalization rate, or the cap rate. It's used in income property valuations. Investors use this to measure return. Net operating income. That's income after operating expenses but before mortgage payments. The NOI does not include debt service. Gross rent multiplier, GRM. That's a property price divided by gross annual rent. A quick way to compare investment properties. The yield. That's the total return on an investment, including income and appreciation. Plottage. Increase in value by combining. Example, one larger lot often has a greater value than two smaller ones. Assemblage. That's a process of combining adjacent parcels into one ownership. Assemblage creates plottage value. Subrogation. That's when a property steps into legal shoes of another. An example, insurance company pays a claim, then dues responsibility payments. Estoppel certificate. That's a document where the tenant confirms the lease terms. It protects buyers of rental property. A mechanic's lien. That's a lien placed by a contractor for unpaid labor or materials. Lis pendens. That's a notice that a lawsuit is pending. It warns potential buyers. Acquired title action. That's a court action to resolve ownership disputes. And it clears title defects. The color of title. Someone appears to hold title but does not legally. It often arises in adverse possession cases. Adverse possession. That's acquiring ownership by occupying land openly and continuously for a period. Open, notorious, exclusive, actual, continuous, and hostile. A fixture. That's personal property becomes real property when permanently attached. As a memory trick, the Maria test. M is the method of attachment, A for adaptation, R for relationship of the parties, I for the intent, and A for an agreement. A trade fixture. That's a fixture installed by a tenant for business use. The tenant may remove it before the lease ends. An example could be a dentist chair. Equitable title. That's a buyer's interest in a property after the contract is signed before closing. Legal title transfers at closing. Legal title. That's the actual ownership recognized by law, transferred by deed. The doctrine of lex. The legal principle preventing someone from enforcing rights after unreasonable time matters. The Statute of Frauds. Certain contracts must be in writing in order to be enforceable. Real estate contracts must be in writing. The bundle of rights. The rights that come with ownership, such as possession, control, exclusion, enjoyment, and disposition. If one is removed, ownership is limited. Vocabulary creates clarity. Clarity creates confidence. Confidence creates passion. My name is Ben. I'm a real estate broker and instructor, and I'll see you in the next class. Aloha.